Hey guys, Thomas the Solo Jr. here, aka Mustached. I'm here to review the movie No Time to Die. This is a 007 movie, and if you end up enjoying this review, then please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing. Also checking out the description, and the second link will be my Patreon page. Any donations are greatly appreciated, and reminders of the shilling will proceed at the end of the review. With that out of the way, let's get into the review. So this is going to be a spoiler review slash rant-ish sort of review about No Time to Die. So if you don't want to be spoiled on this particular movie, then you've been officially warned. With that out of the way, let's get into the spoilers. So, when I first saw this trailer and thinking back to James Bond as a character, among various other franchises, you know, the more and more information came out, the more and more I got worried, as there have already been plenty of franchises that have been slaughtered for the particular delivery of forced diversity, if you will. And it has been a consistent issue in terms of you're doing this sort of sacrificing thing, and you're doing it, and you're still not creating interesting characters within the terms of the whole diversity thing. And here's the thing. I'm not opposed to eventually passing the torch down. In fact, when I first, one of the earlier examples of passing the torch down was, say, Peter Parker to Miles Morales. And initially, when I heard about that, I was actually pretty excited to see it. And then I watched the movie, and then I was immediately disappointed. Particularly, the ending had, there were definitely other segments of that movie that had quite a bit to be desired from what I can recall. It has been a while since I've seen Into the Spider-Verse. And, again, passing the torch down in a way where you sort of give enough service to the character, and there is something left to be desired. And I think this is something that has been long forgotten in movies, is this whole training aspect that really is completely lost in these more modern movies, and I think that that is a great sacrifice. Instead, we are given these characters who are just good, or they're great at what they do already, and it's boring. It is so boring. There's nothing fascinating about a character that's already perfect or close to perfect. We don't need another. We don't need, Ray being all close to as perfect as possibly can be and super overpowered. We don't need that. We need a character. And, I think with me talking about Into the Spider-Verse, I think I bring that movie up in particular within good reason, as it has a very familiar or similar outcome in terms of what they do to the previous character. And that is, again, this is a spoiler review, and I'm going to save you some time here. They kill James Bond at the end of the movie. So, there you go. But, of course, I want to get to the nitty-gritty of the details, because that is also equally as important. As I've stated time and time again, or at least when I review certain things, that, just because a character, even well-established, dies, that doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. A character dying can be very impactful to a series. In fact, I may not have stated this one, but just to throw out another show, one that I, and probably many of other people, were either once fans of or still maybe fans of, I'm not entirely sure, but in The Walking Dead. Now, I guess spoilers for The Walking Dead, but one of the characters they kill in that show was Glenn. Um, and this was done in the comics and then eventually done in the show. And by the time they get it done in the show, they built up the character so well, and he has quite a journey to his name. And in a way, he's sort of killed in a more brutal, and probably one of the more brutal deaths I've seen in quite some time, if I'm being completely honest. Um, and because of the character work that they were able to do with Glenn, his death, to me, is one of the best horror movie deaths in history. Period. In history. Like, I, I don't know if I can list a lot of characters where I'm like, man, it really sucks that character died. I really like that character. I really feared for that character's life, their safety, and then they're, snuffed out at some point. That is an example, to me, of how to handle this properly, and setting up the character to do just that. How to do it improperly, just to flip the coin, is, to do another example, is The Last of Us 2. This is where you take characters and you write them in such a way that the amount of stupidity that has to go into, each thing that needs to be set up for the character to die, the conveniences among many, the level of Joel's intelligence, the level of Ellie's intelligence, the fact that she steps into the room where she sees Joel, not even accounting that there would probably be more people in that room, you know, and, previous knowledge would probably establish that she would normally be more careful, on top of the fact that she had a perfectly good shot on Abby from the door frame. That is a perfect example of stupefying the characters, plural, to make something work. And when you do that, it is a sacrifice to these characters for something that loses all impact, because now everyone is suffering because of it. Now the characters are suffering because of it. The characters surrounding Joel, for example, in The Last of Us 2. So in No Time to Die, while I wouldn't say I'm the biggest 007 fan among all the franchises I can think of. I don't think I would say I'm, again, a huge fan, but I've seen previous movies of this iteration, and I'm pretty sure some time ago I've seen the other iterations, but, regardless of whether or not an actor wanted to play him or not, this is the iteration with Daniel Craig. Whether or not he's interested in it or not doesn't really bother me all that much. But still, the treatment of the character is something that is, again, we're going to need to discuss. Was his journey and what his final moments were they meaningful? Were they, was the character, well represented in this iteration? So, enough preamble and enough of, the end. Let's start at the beginning of this movie. So the movie starts off on this ice area. I'm not sure where it's located. Perhaps Greenland somewhere, or north, like far north somewhere. Or maybe it's another country. I'm not entirely sure. We see a man in the ice forest, and we cut to a mother and daughter just sort of hanging about, and this man enters the house eventually, and he has a gun, and he proceeds to kill the mother, and the daughter nearly drowns after being pulled into the water for a set number of, ice water, by the way. She was, like, pretty much drowning, and then this character who killed the mother decided to shoot around her and save her for whatever reason. Um, Keep in mind that I don't think at any point in the movie he really explains why he would decide to save her, but, kill the mother. I'm not really sure. Um, so, already not, you know, anyways, uh, what I find baffling is that she found a gun and fired at him before this all happens, before she, nearly drowns, and shoots him virtually in the head-ish area, if I remember correctly, and he somehow survives. And there's no explanation in the entire movie as to why he would survive a bullet to the head, so this movie is already running into flags, and this is independent of the rest of the film and any other establishing things that they want to do in this film. Keeping in mind that this is also a sequel to whatever the previous 007 movie in the James Bond thing was. I honestly can't recall what the name of it is off the top of my head, and I'm too poor and too lazy, well, not too poor, but too lazy to look it up right now, so, whatever. Anyway, so, he saves her, then we cut to her as an adult, and we see James Bond, travel, and these two are now dating, so this is, a long period of time that we are skipping here, which is whatever, because, this is a James Bond movie, so we gotta follow James Bond. It makes sense so far, at least that part does. However, while she's out and about and doing her thing, he goes to a funeral site. I'm not sure, and maybe I missed something from the previous movie, or my recollection of it is very poor currently, but I'm not sure why he's currently, or why he visits this funeral. I'm not sure what character he's playing, paying respects to here, but I'm pretty sure it might be someone, it must be someone from one of the previous movies that I'm just not aware of. Nonetheless, he takes out this piece of paper, and then these symbols start appearing about stuff. And while he's doing this, an explosion occurs, like 5 feet away from him. And, once more, the character should be dead, but he's not. So now we have to do this twice. Why are characters surviving things that they shouldn't be surviving? Why is this something that more modern movies consistently do? This was in Black Widow as well. Just the most recent movie where I've seen someone, survive something they shouldn't have, or, the Ten Rings movie, I already forget the character's name, Chun-Chi, sorry, these characters surviving keep in mind, James Bond is he's a human, believe it or not. I know that's hard to believe since, he's white, and I know that is one of the main reasons why they kill him, as they do other protagonists for the wokeness, is that if a character is white, it's okay to kill him. So yeah, so he somehow survives that, and these vehicles start to chase him. He does this rope trick to dangle himself down, tackle these, attackers, make his way to taking out these people, and this attack leads him to far less trust her, because she had some association, I guess, question mark. It seems to imply this. And again, this is all happening with the context of this movie. Again, there are certain elements in this movie that feel like don't really. Again, they stand alone with this movie. There's nothing pre-established beforehand that helps this situation except the enemy group. That is the only thing that carried over, I'm pretty sure, from the previous movie that I'm aware of, on top of just James Bond. Anyway, uh, so they go through a chase scene. He shoots them as well eventually. Um, while their car is stopped and pretty much in the middle of this gun out, he summons his little miniguns because he's in his Bond car, I'm guessing. I'm not sure how he got to his car knowing where, whatever. Anyway, point being that they survive the outcome. And then 5 years pass after he leaves her. Again, that trust being a little bit broken. Thus, we now move on to these operatives moving into into this building. They have a man on the inside, so they're able to use him to get in, grab their bio weapon, or nano machine weapon is more accurate, I suppose, to do their evil deeds. This is our group of bad guys that we are now following temporarily. We see them blow up the air facility once they're done clearing it, and we cut to Bond fishing, so he's somewhere else now. I'm not sure where, but whatever. He finds Felix. Felix, I'm sorry, I assume he's in the previous movies at some point. I don't remember his character, if he was. It's just been too long. But they seem to know each other. But he refuses the deal currently that he puts down. Meanwhile, after some moving around, an agent named Nomi picks up, and she claims that she is the new 007. So let's get to talking about this. So we have our new 007, and of course, this is where we typically ought to go. Of course, James Bond claims that it is just a number. Now, I find this quite an interesting decision to say. So, I think there's something important to discuss here. What is a character and what is a mantle, right? Spider-Man, for example, is a mantle. The character who can establish that mantle could be anybody. It is Peter Parker for the majority of his run, but he eventually does pass it down to, again, as I mentioned, Miles Morales. And the mantle is passed down. Batman, for example. He has various different Robins, variations of Robins. So whenever there is a new Robin, he is passing down the mantle of Robin to another character or another human. So that is passing down the mantle of Robin, for example. So the mantle of 007 being passed down is actually something I technically don't have an issue with, believe it or not. What I do have an issue with is the character. She is boring. Point blank, she's boring. She's by the books. And she herself is obsessed with the number, even though he says that it is just a number. And she keeps obsessing over it. It's within the dialogue. And those are the only two things about her character that I can point out to, is that she follows the rules and she's obsessed with the number. That's it. That's all we know about her in this entire movie. Keeping in mind that this is supposed to be the future of 007, this Naomi character, and that is what we know about her. That is troubling. For the issues I have with Miles Morales, I know more about him as a character more than I know about Naomi. I know about his family issues. He seems to, again, follow very closely to Peter Parker in some regards, but he has a bit of a different, the ethnicity does play an aspect to a degree, but it's not the core of his character either, which I think is very important, obviously. Um, and they establish again that at least he has a character. There are elements you can pull from that. Whereas Naomi, again, the only two things we know is that she follows the rules and that she is obsessed with a number. That doesn't really tell me a lot about this character, other than that she's obsessed and follows the rules. Outside of that, I can't tell you anything because there's nothing else to say. What are her weaknesses? What does she need to improve on? It being this new agent and whatnot. I'm going to tell you now, there isn't any weaknesses because she's apparently already good at the job, which already erases, potential of passing down the mantle properly. Of being like, hey, this is how you use this tool or these tools. This is how this is how you can potentially get information out of, the person you're getting information out of. There are so many things that you can do here, and this movie doesn't do any of that. At least, again, I'm sorry to bring up Into the Spider-Verse. At least Peter Parker teaches Miles how to swing. The whole combat sequence, teaching him how to fight, that part was terrible, but outside of that, again, at least it was something. At least he taught him something, and there's something to that. There's, this, again, this mentor mentality that is crucially missing. And again, because now we are establishing that she's just already good, there's this whole chunk of information that is just, oh, she's just good at what she does. How boring. How uninteresting is that? When you already have a character that's pretty much perfect for the amounts of time we see her. By the way, she isn't in the movie awfully that much, by the way. She sort of pops in here in a few, in one other location, I think, and then near the end. And that's about it, from what I can remember. Anyways, so they cut to the headquarters. We're mentioning Spectre. That's the group, the evil group from the previous that carried over to this movie. So he meets up with Felix, now in on the op, that being James Bond. He meets with this other agent, this other intern, I guess. This girl, I'm not sure why they didn't just combine this young woman that they introduced with Naomi. I'm not sure why they didn't just cluster this character together. It makes no sense, because she sort of actually goes with Bond, actually, giving him the outfit, kind of going with him. They go to this party together, and as he's sort of in this party, gathering intel, a light is placed upon him, and this gas, suddenly, when he's called out, starts to swoop down and kill these people around him, but doesn't seem to kill him for some reason, so I'm not sure what that was all about, but there's a gun out after the fact. Again, I asked in my notes, how is he not affected? I'm not sure. Meanwhile, for separation of 007, aka James Bond, I suppose I'll call the other one Female 7, or Female Bond. or female 7, as I refer to her in my notes, or F7. So F7, for simplicity's sake, is on the rooftops, very briefly, again. Meanwhile, him and his current partner take a little drink. And again, that could have just been her at the, getting pointers, getting the drink with Bond, actually having a scene with Bond, any of that would have been something. But nope, she's off doing something else. F7 is. Meanwhile, so, apparently, we cut back to our bad guys who say, they have something to do with DNA. Their weapon is dealing with DNA or something or other. It's a little convoluted, but apparently it just kills people within your DNA, so your family, within the context of just that, I think. And throughout that, Bond finds himself fighting his way out, and he's on the ship where Felix was when this attack happens, and Felix in the process dies. So that's another death of a character that I guess we're just sweeping him away too. So Bond and her, the F7, walk together. So again, they could be talking about stuff, but I don't think they do. So Bond wants to figure out what these weapons are all about. So he goes to Q, his place, with one other op that is more inclined to follow him, I guess. And we cut to, then, our main bad guy, whose name I wrote as Biofield. I know that's not how it's pronounced, but that's what I put, so that's what I'll call him. Or just Bio. Or Bo. I'll call him Bo, for short. So he's the main solo Spectre guy alive after that attack. Because the attack was on the Spectre group, which is, again, bizarre, but okay. Meanwhile, he's talking to Bond's ex, and this, he brings out his mask, blah, blah, blah. And Bond then talks to his former boss. Again, not sure what happened in the previous movie that made Bond excommunicated. Probably something to do with the Spectre group, I'm assuming, from the context, question mark. And then they, we learn more about how the enemies are using nanomachines. And then Bond meets with his ex. So him and his ex talk to this Bo guy. And while he's doing that, Q is looking into the party, trying to figure out what's happening. And eventually the prisoner dies after some information is outed, but not all of it. And apparently, this is where the movie suddenly gets confusing. Apparently, his DNA, aka James Bond's DNA, did that. So that already puts into the question of, so it's not family then, is it? Or just not that it's who you come into contact with? Then again, then why did he not die at the party? See, this is why you have to make clear, consistent rules when you make a movie, because then you don't have to do all this convoluted stuff about, who this DNA is affecting. It makes the weapon very unclear as to how it actually works. That is why, again, when you structure your movie or your story or whatever you're making, to make clear and concise rules as to why this functions this way, how it functions, where it doesn't function, any weaknesses it might have. You really want to go into detail on these pieces of information, and most importantly, make sure none of the information when you make these rules conflict with one another, because once the rules start conflicting, it becomes confusing to an audience. So now I, as an audience member, am confused watching this because I don't understand how this weapon works. So there you go, a little tip for you people watching this little video here. Which is something I try to do in any review where I'm even reviewing something positively. I'm always like, hey, you can use this, or how to improve on it. This is something I'm trying to do in my more current reviews. Anyway, so, at any rate, he meets back up with Q eventually, and meanwhile, this sudden thing in Japan happens where they find stuff. I'm not sure what it was. I wrote stuff in my notes, but I'm not sure. Again, it's unclear. At least in my notes, so I'm pretty sure I wasn't paying full attention at that point. Anyway. There's another chase with the ex-girlfriend and her daughter. She has a daughter now. It's assumed that this is James Bond's kid, question mark? Or is having implications. They keep referring to the eyes being the same. I guess Bo also shares the same colored eyes, I think, in the movie. So there's implication it could have either been Bond or the villain of the movie. So the daughter belongs to one of them, I think, is what they're trying to tell us very clearly. And the group, this new Spectre group, I'm not even sure what they are, begin chasing them. So Bond helps them in the forest, starts tricking them in the forest, shoots them out, kills one of the agents that killed Felix from before, or helped kill Felix, I should probably say. And this is where F7, female Bond, picks him up after the fact. And abruptly, she's like, hey, you can have your number back. Okay, again, I'm not really sure what that was supposed to mean. If the number doesn't mean anything, I'm not sure why you needed it to give it back or whatever. But he seems to accept it nonetheless. And him and her, Bond and F7, head to the island where all of this is going down. So we're cutting into the third act here. Eventually, they split off, and he's trying to distract while she's planting bombs or whatever. And while they're moving their way in, their communications get cut off. The ex-girlfriend is brought here to this island, as well as the daughter. And she escapes on her own using this blinding tea, apparently. While Bond tries to attack Bo, the villain of the movie. He was talking about before how he's controlled by people or whatever, he's trying to give his motivation here at this point in the movie. Not that it's awfully important at this point in time, but it is there, I guess, so whatever. So he sort of just lets the daughter go at some point when they break off from Bond. He kind of just drops her and says, go off on your own, and she does. So, okay, that was weird. Meanwhile, we see F7 back up with this prisoner. She gets the line, there is a time to die, to the prisoner guy. She kills him. So she has that moment, even though it's not earned at all, but okay. Um, so anyways, Bond eventually finds the daughter, and moves back up, uh, along with them, letting the mother and daughter get out, via the boat he came in on. Um, and I guess F7 somehow ends up with them. They don't show her getting to the mom and the daughter, but she somehow ends up with them, so I don't know. Anyways, he fights his way back up. He requests that the bombs, the missiles, be fired at his location. The doors temporarily relock, and he makes his way further in, and eventually is shot by our villain, and then eventually is injected. He injects Bond with this thing, this vial on him, injecting him with that nanomachine stuff. And Bond, being rightly pissed about that, decides to kill Bo, and pulls the switch to re-release and reopen the hole so the missiles can come through. Meanwhile, as I mentioned before, F7 is somehow miraculously with the daughter and the mother back on the island. This is where he radios in, tells F7 to give the little walkie-talkie things that they have to the mother. He shares his final moments, staying on the island because apparently he gave up, and is nuked alongside the island, and as I mentioned at the beginning of the movie, James Bond dies. We then cut to the group sometime later, mourning his death and reading out his final words about how the time he gave and all that stuff. And then we cut to the mother and daughter taking a drive as the mother tells tales of James Bond in his final moments as a character before we move on to our new 007, and that was No Time to Die. So yeah, quite a number of issues here, obviously. Another case of sacrificing this new character and not really doing anything too interesting with her. This new 007, this new mantle, the mantle you want to pass down and you want to be all woke about it. It's not earned, and you really don't do anything with it. You just make a bland character that's already great at what she does, and it's just not interesting when you do that. It really isn't. Bond, throughout the movies he was in, he even, he struggles. He in this movie included. Hell, there were points where he should have died, as I mentioned, but he just doesn't until at the end where he needs to die because got to get that new Bond, or that new 007 in, because you can't use the name James Bond anymore. And that is kind of what this movie is trying to do in a weird way. I feel like that's kind of irresponsible on a large scale. I mean, James Bond, outside of Daniel Craig's portrayal of James Bond, there have obviously been other people who have played James Bond, but I don't ever recall him dying in any other iteration that I can think of. I might be mistaken. And again, you feel free to point them out if that is the case, but still, killing off Bond in this particular iteration, I mean, again, the only thing you can do now is, again, move on to this new character who is utterly boring, or you have to reboot and make James Bond all over again. Those are your options. That is what this movie has left us with. Think about that. And I mean, I get it. Eventually, characters like James Bond are going to be rebooted naturally, but I mean, that's just such a shitty way of doing it. Is, just being like, yep, this is the final one, just whoop. Um, and again, they're trying to lean this other way, where they're like, no, 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 her, though, it's her time to shine. And again, I'm not against a female, whatever, and anything. Um, Again, some of my favorite characters are female, and it just pisses me off when these characters just aren't done well. Like, do you want your representation? Fucking earn it. Fucking put the work in. Actually write an interesting character. If you're not gonna do woke properly, then step the fuck away. Kindly step the fuck away. Kindly stop fucking up other characters, sacrificing other characters to do it, too. That is just so tiring. It's just so old. It's just so tiring and old, and who's enjoying this? Who is getting anything out of this? More and more characters, more and more franchises are just whew, and on to the next thing, on to the next iteration. There's no, again, proper torch bearing, nor no proper training. There's no step in between. It's just new iteration. That's it. That's all there is. In the new iteration, they're just perfect versions of that character, and it's so boring. There's nothing to that. When your characters have no flaws, and she's barely in the movie, there's nothing to really say about that character. I'm surprised I can even call her a character. She barely is a character. And now what they're going to have to do, if they are going to proceed with this new 007, this woman, is that they're going to have to establish, they might even have to do a prequel thing, or before this whole movie, her actual training. If they want to earn any goodwill in this iteration, that's probably the way they're going to have to do it. And actually have her have character flaws and actually learn how to become an agent, and then have her be an actual good agent, and then, whatever next step there is to this. But in terms of, again, just another franchise, I can't say I'm surprised in the slightest that we're just on another one. Another one that bites the dust. And look, I'm someone who's still fighting for something new. I mean, no one knows what Syndicate X is, or barely anyone knows what Syndicate X is, and I published that way back then, but again, no one knows what that is. No one picked up my book. That is something I would still technically consider new because of the lack of people who know what it is. So, when you have people like me who want to actually, contain everything, when you have well-written diversity, characters with flaws, a well-balanced story, an interesting villain, an interesting group of heroes, that is what I'm trying to establish all within one story. And I think that there's a lot more to that, and a lot more of a craft to that than, these franchises are doing now, because they just want the representation without putting in any semblance of work. They just want to use the number, the number she's obsessed with. They just want to use that to hook in people just to see the old thing be swept away under the rug, best left forgotten, for the new thing that is just boring. There's nothing to the new thing. It's just she plays by the rules. So, okay, what was it? That doesn't really tell me anything. other than that. That in itself, it's pretty self-evident. You need to do more work. You need to do more. This movie, oh boy, I think I'm gonna go for either a 2 or 3 out of 10. That's the highest I think I can go. Somewhere around there. This movie is not great. It's among one of the worst movies I've seen. With just what they do with the character and what they allow in the confusion and just a lack of there's not much. There's nothing really much going on here. So I think I'm gonna go with a 2 out of 10. Ultimately, not impressive. Definitely, probably skip this one. And if you enjoyed this review/rant, then please, again, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, make sure to check out those links in the description. One will head you over to my Discord server, the other to my Patreon page. Any donations are greatly appreciated, and until next time, everyone, bye-bye.